How are you feeling?
Great.
Yeah? Good. And you're here in my studio.
I'm here.
You're here. You've made it. When's the last time you didn't do anything?
Well, I guess probably, 2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago.
I've never had a job that was so all-consuming.
You've tuned in to the Gritty Birds podcast, and I'm your host, Jenny Wren. Gritty Birds is an insider's view going behind the music scenes, profiling the personalities and insights of the grittiest of the industry, the unsung heroes running the game. Gritty Birds is sponsored by Vortex Music Magazine, with new episodes up every Tuesday. This week is a very special double episode featuring Brandon Nikola of the recently closed indie venue Habesha. Throughout the episode, we'll be featuring some of Brandon's favorite music, including songs from Minden, And, Joanna Newsom, Grammys, Consumer, and Old Light. Also, stay tuned on how to win tickets to Balto's 7-inch release at Secret Society on June 11th. Now let's have some fun.
Hi, Jenny. My name is Andy Hansen. I saw that you were looking for voicemails, so I had one about a year and a half ago. I was playing with a band there, and we ended up being pushed later and later in the night. So all night, I'm the drummer for the band, and I ended up just talking to all the different groups that were playing before us, and one of them was from out of town, and they were this touring band from Reno, and they were signed to a local record label that I'd never heard of before, and I ended up talking to those folks that ran the record label, and it was called Breakup Records. And after talking to them for a little while, they were like, hey, we're going to head out. We need a drummer for a band, actually, that we're starting. And then it was about, we're talking about Vancouver, because that's where I'm from across the river. They're talking about San Francisco, about Brooklyn, all this cool stuff. And I was like, well, I really hope I get to see them again. Well, that show was on a Tuesday. That Friday, they called me back in the afternoon, and I ended up joining the band Bed because of that Habesha show and because of the networking opportunities that were kind of available there. I ended up touring with them for like 6 months, and we ended up just made a lot of great connections all over the West Coast, just kind of out of that one interaction. It was kind of a fortuitous experience at Habesha. So, and Brandon booking that show with touring band. Had he not done that with booking my band with a touring band, then that never would have happened.
So this week we have a special guest in, Brandon Nikola of the recently closed Portland indie venue Habesha Lounge. Brandon, to catch up our listeners who aren't familiar with the venue, can you tell us a little bit about what your role was at Habesha?
Well, for the first year and a half, I was the only person that worked upstairs. There was the family that ran the business and they ran the restaurant, but as far as the day-to-day operations of the bar venue, that was me.
Had Habesha been open before this? Like, when you came on as the bar runner, had there been a bar there before?
Yeah, there were a few people, a couple of friends of mine, just, acquaintances that had worked there during the time between when Tony worked there, when it was Mudai, and then when I took it over. I guess that was maybe like 3 years or so, between 2 or 3 years. But yeah, it wasn't anyone who had taken ownership of it per se. It was just people who were coming in to work bar shifts. They were strictly bartenders. As far as booking, it was, they would have an occasional show if a friend had a record release thing or it was somebody's birthday party perhaps. They had a karaoke that was going on, I believe, like 6 months prior to me taking it over. But to my knowledge, at that point, before I started, it definitely wasn't, no one was taking ownership of it and trying to make it their own,
So 2.5 years ago when you came on board, and right before that, you were putting on house shows. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the house shows that you were putting on. How many?
Well, it became a lot, and that was kind of the reason. I mean, I had lived there for maybe a year or two. I've lived in that house for 4 years now, and I had been living there for about a year with my friend Adam Cerisi, who he's in bands around town. He plays bass and sings for Carrie and Spring, and he just put out an album of some solo stuff called Said Goner, which is amazing. Both projects have played at Habesha. But he was doing house shows for years before that at that house, and it was a lot of local bands, but then there would be touring bands coming through, and Bear Cubbin had played there. Duck, Little Brother Duck played there a lot. Yusko played there a lot. Beach Party. Just, a bunch of friends. It was usually a way to help out touring bands and local bands that were starting. There were definitely a lot of local bands, maybe playing their first show or something like that. But they were usually pretty raucous, it was definitely stressful.
Yeah.
It's definitely stressful living in that house. And again, when you're doing something for a cause that you believe in, you're willing, it's a good stress.
Right. What was one of the most memorable shows that you put on at your house before you came to Habesha?
We had a 4th of July show. We had some Halloween shows that were pretty epic. We had bands would do cover sets. One year I sang in an At the Drive-In cover band that was basically Duck, Little Brother Duck with me singing. And that was pretty insane. All of the Halloween shows, really. There could have been 300 people there for all I know.
My gosh.
Who could keep count at that point,
Yeah.
We had a 4th of July show with The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die, which was probably the most, I don't want to say legit because I don't mean to, it's not to say that all of our shows weren't legit in a way, but there were parents bringing their children.
Really?
Oh yeah, no, they're especially at that time, I think maybe they had just put out an album and they were kind of popular,
Mm-hmm.
They had a very large cult following and it was 4th of July.
Right.
So it was kind of, just the
day parties.
All of the factors kind of, converged and created this perfect storm of all ages wonderland in our backyard and basement and all over our house. And again, there could have been 300 people there.
Wow.
And it was great because I feel like at that time as well there was a pretty good house show scene going on, at least amongst my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like whether they were doing them regularly or they were just happening.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was much more prevalent throughout town to go to a house show rather than go to a venue. And again, that could have just been the scene that I was a part of at the time.
But that's what you're experiencing.
Yeah, definitely.
What was it that led you to Habesha, where you started putting on shows? Did you go there with the intention of being a bartender and then found an opportunity? Or was it the other way around?
Honestly, it was the October before I started working at Habesha in February of 2013. So it was October 2012. I think we had 4 or 5 shows scheduled for that month, 2 or 3 in one weekend.
At your house?
At my house.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of shows in 1 month.
It's a lot of shows, and these weren't just...
So you were running a venue, but you weren't.
That was that month was sort of like the culmination of, it was starting to get out of control. It hadn't been, we were maybe doing 1, maybe 2 a month for that summer, and maybe 1 every other month for a while. And then it just kind of, I think maybe there were houses that stopped doing it, or we were just the only people crazy enough to do it as often as people would ask us, and we just wouldn't say no, or maybe both. But I had 4 or 5 shows, and I knew that we couldn't have all of those. It was just I was begging for trouble. Our neighbors had been nice enough.
You're about to get shut down.
Yeah,
not exactly, but
you just you can only push the envelope so far in situations like that before people just kind of snap. And they had been pretty nice, and understanding up to that point, and I didn't want to cross the line. So I was looking for a spot to move one of the shows, and so I would always go to get beer at the Koken Market over there on MLK and Deacon, and the guy who runs it, nice guy. He would always say, "Man, you're getting a lot of beer, party time." And and I told him, "Well, yeah, I'm getting it, for bands who are playing at my house, and I just try to, provide a little, maybe food and some beer for these touring bands coming through." And you go, "Oh, well, you should, you know bands, you should talk to my friend. He's got a place up on Broadway, and they're looking for people to maybe bring some shows there, or whatever." And at the time, I was working in human services. I was working. I was working as a job coach for emotionally disturbed teenage boys, young adults who were also sex offenders, and or had been offended, and it was a very emotionally draining job that I loved, and I felt like I was good at it, and I had been there for a while, so I was comfortable. But I wanted to change. I'd been doing that in various capacities for about 6 years, and I was ready to move on and do something else, maybe something that was a little more geared towards my love of music and art in general. So when I went there, I just kind of saw an opportunity to maybe make that change, and get a foot in the bartending world, because I know it's not always easy to get a bartending gig. And I figured,
you bartended before that?
No, I had never stepped foot behind a bar prior to that, which was really funny, because the first show.
Yeah, what was the first show?
The first show, again, I had that show in October, and it was a good show. It was this band Grass is Green from, I believe they're from Boston. They're actually I think that they're friends, or they're label mates, or they were at the time, with Speedy Ortiz, who later played the following April because of that. So that was kind of cool. That was probably the band that I was like the most memorable band that I was exposed to, that I hadn't really heard of prior to that. And then seeing, they've gone on to do some pretty cool stuff. So that was kind of interesting to get to see them live. And I mean, they were amazing. But it was Grass is Green, and I believe it was Duck Little Brother Duck, and oh man, I can't. Anyways, it didn't really go that great. I mean, there wasn't a lot of people there. The bands were great. It was a great show. But I mean, the room, for anyone who's been there, it did not look the way it looked on closing night when I got there. I mean, it was an empty room with no stage, no projector, the bare walls. They had a boombox for a stereo.
What?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was an empty room with a bar.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of weird. But again,
did you bring the PA in then?
They had a PA. Now, the PA we were using was apparently the karaoke equipment that I later found out we weren't supposed to be using.
Oh.
Yeah. So then once I found that out, I went out and then got some equipment. That was another thing that was kind of an obstacle working there, was that a lot of that, pretty much everything there was stuff that I purchased personally. I mean, all of the sound equipment and all that stuff was, I slowly, I think in the beginning I was maybe borrowing some money from my dad, but then when I saw that, I actually started to make a decent amount of money, enough where I could actually go out and buy these things, and so it wasn't really, it was paying for itself. I saw it as an investment, and it definitely paid off, but at the time there was nothing in there, and it was just kind of using what we had. And but again, people wanted a place to play.
How long did it take for it to build into something that was sustainable?
I mean, probably, I would say at least a year before I didn't feel completely embarrassed to have people come in there and try to pass it off as a business.
Yeah.
You know, I had a grand vision for what I wanted to do when I first got there. You know, starry eyes, naive. I thought, oh well, we'll just have these drinks and we'll do all of this cool stuff. We'll have this happy hour and blah blah blah. And then, you know, slowly the reality of the situation sets in. It was like, okay, well, there's not a lot of starting capital to work with, so.
Right.
You know, we don't have the refrigeration space to be providing all these services that I want. You know, to have mint, you know, in a place that's handy, or to have a number of beers to, you know, like a larger selection of beers to keep behind the bar, so I don't have to keep running back and forth to the. You know, it was just like the setup was poor.
What did you find to make it work then?
To just not have that great, I had to just figure out what I had control over and to just make the best out of that. You know, It was, I didn't think of it or even refer to it in my head as a bar. I thought of it as a place for bands to play, and I wanted to at least have the sound equipment be as good as I could, you know, as I could financially make it. And I just wanted to make sure I was I wanted to treat every band and be as accommodating as I could be to every band that came through.
Right.
And, you know, if I didn't have all the drinks, at least I wanted to make people feel welcome.
What was the response of the community at the beginning?
I would say the same that it's always been, which was, you know, this is a town of musicians. Mm-hmm. So whenever a place pops up that its focus is live music, I feel like people want to give it a chance. Mm-hmm. So that it was definitely a lot of, you know, we had a lot of experimental musicians that were coming through, because it's not always very easy for experimental musicians to get a show in Portland if it's not at a house, because a lot of venues just don't. I don't know. It's just, you know, it's just kind of like it's like a little like punk rockish sort of like weird scene that just doesn't get a lot of respect for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Whether it be money, financial, I won't get into that, but, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons. Anyway, it started out as being very well. The experimental music community had embraced that venue for sure at the beginning, and I think that's kind of that was the foundation for me, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, definitely my friends' bands to a degree, but also it was a weird place.
Yeah.
You know, I think people wanted to give it a chance because it was me and just, you know, and my friends, but I think a lot of times, and myself included, I mean, you walk into that place and it was like, this is weird.
It was the only place where I could see like haul into a room where a pin could drop and you could like hear a packed room and then see Grammys ripping it apart and everyone blowing up.
Right.
And like, yeah, it was small enough where I felt you could still feel intimately involved with it, but like big enough that you could get enough people in there to catch one of those shows and really feel like you experienced it.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, just, you know, places like CBGB's come to mind. Not that I would never try to like compare any sort of like, you know, historical legacy or anything like that, but it just in terms of, yeah, like you can see amazing bands in this tiny, you know, just ramshackle place, but it kind of adds a certain amount of charm to it, because, you know, there's nothing pretentious about it. You know, like you're going to see music.
You get your PBR.
Exactly. You're going to drink your can of beer and see them, and, you know, see musicians and hear the music and get sweaty.
Hang out with your friends on the porch.
Hang out with your friends. Exactly. You're not. You're not going to the Schnitz. You know, and no offense to the Schnitz. You know.
At all. I mean,
at all. That's it's just a totally different experience.
Yeah.
It's a totally different experience, and it's not. You can't always. You can't buy it. It just has to happen.
Right. When did karaoke and the open mic start?
Well, like I said, karaoke had been going on prior to me
You were using
starting
the PA,
there.
okay.
Right. But I don't think, honestly, I've talked to Jessica.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Jessica, who did the
Jessica
karaoke. Yes, Jessica. Who I love and adore. She's awesome, and that's been one of the best parts of working there, is getting to meet people like her and her whole group of friends. I mean, that, she definitely had a very integral part in that night taking off, and just, her connections to, people in the scene, and just, once I think we both realized, okay, like, we need to try to make this work. She definitely, took the lead on that in a lot of ways, and she knew who to talk to get people there. And, apparently it worked. But I think that, a couple people, Theo, Craig for sure, was definitely, he started coming and started telling his friends.
I started coming because of Theo.
Dan Talmadge,
yeah,
was huge.
The Minden crew would come on Thursday nights.
Honestly,
so late.
And me and Jess have talked about this multiple times, and I've thanked Dan for this. I had a meeting. I had sat down with my boss when I came in, and karaoke just wasn't really doing too good. It was just it was one of the only nights that we had to pay someone a flat fee. So it was just like, it was starting not to make business sense to do it, even though I loved it and I saw potential, and I loved working with Jessica and John, her boss. And I wanted to make it work, but he was basically saying, if this doesn't start doing well within a month, then we're gonna have to stop. So I told Jess that, and that night, Dan came in. I didn't know Dan at the time. He came in and he was like, this is a cool little place. I like this. This is cool. And we were like, well, you better tell your friends, because
it's going to be gone.
It's going to be gone in a month if it doesn't start, and I mean, literally from that point on, people started to come. Maybe it also had something to do with the fact that it was right around, like late spring, summer. So, and that always, you always saw an upswing in business. So it was a little, maybe just a combination of things, but there were definitely certain people who had a huge impact on that. And I think that was probably about maybe 6 to 8 months into it, it finally started to become like a thing that people around town started to talk about, like, oh, High Bay Karaoke, you gotta go,
Yeah, in the last year, I've been hearing a lot more about the open mic from like Stephanie Skelza, for example. And I never made it down to it, but
you were sorely missed.
If you guys can figure out a way for me to bring a piano or just have a piano there, I will go to open mics.
Right, I remember we had that conversation.
This is the whole thing. I've done it like 2 or 3 times, and each time it's like just you haul it out and then you carry it and you bring it on. You play 2 songs and then you have to haul it out.
That was open mic was definitely, that actually, I think it started in January. It was about a year and a half old. It had started January of 2014. And my friend Seb Dan ran it, and a couple other people were very helpful during that. They would, my friend Sam Dean, Ben Blake, Matika and Portia, a lot of people came together for that. I mean, that was a really sweet night, just because there were so many people who were willing to help all the time. So it made it very easy on me. It wasn't always the busiest night, so I could actually enjoy myself. I would always perform, and I have stories that I read, or I would sing a song or do something like that. And they were just very helpful the whole time. And the artists that we had, I mean, a lot of times, I've been to open mic, especially when I first moved here. I was just trying to get around and see what was going on in town. And, open mic, it's nice, but it doesn't always tend to bring out the best talent in town necessarily. And that's no offense, I mean, that's what it's there for. It's for people who aren't experienced to gain some experience playing in front of people.
Yeah. And especially I feel like open mics were one of those things where open mics are open for a while and then they shut down because the numbers aren't there and they get shut down.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I heard about this one was just, it was really appreciated, and I feel like there was a community there that just hearing the buzz about it, that it was appreciated more than a lot of them, and something worked there that was really positive.
Yeah, well, again, the thing that I feel set us apart from a lot of open mics was that we did have a lot of experienced, talented people that would come to maybe just work on their new stuff, or just because there was such a great community. I mean, you felt it, everyone was very respectful of all the performers. I mean, you had your nights, but generally speaking, when people were up there, people were quiet. And not always because they were into it, but it was just, that was the level of respect that was what the room brought. That was, well, Seb Dan had a part in that too. I mean, I feel like, he sort of, played the role of, I don't want to say cop, but, he would go around and be like, hey, like. He was dad. He went around and kept everyone in check, and made sure that everyone was being respectful, because you were about to go up there, and you don't want people, talking on their phone. Yeah, it wasn't necessary. You could go outside. You could, you don't want to tell. It feels weird telling people to be quiet at a bar to an extent, but also at the same time, it's like, well, have some respect. I mean, it's just common courtesy, at the same time. But it was never really a problem, right? Because people were so cool and people were so respectful and supportive of one another, and we had some people do some weird stuff. Really? Oh yeah. Experimental? Experimental. Maybe it was just the poetry that they were reading was just a little out there, which I love. Again, like it was nothing that was offensive or anything like that. Even to just good taste. It might have been, racial or political, or it might have been provocative in certain ways, but it was never anything that was offensive to one's taste. Yeah. It was just like, okay, you're doing what you're doing, and it's maybe not my cup of tea, but I can respect that. Did you ever share anything there? Yeah. No, I have a bunch of stories that I've written, and just poetry, I guess you could call it. But I started to read that, and I would usually sing something a cappella. Yeah. And that sort of became a thing. There were definitely a few nights when I didn't want to, but they wouldn't let me off the hook that easily, so. But it was nice. I enjoyed it. It was nice to be able to have that venue where I could kind of do my thing as well, and sort of keep that creative thing that I had lost, keep the spark a little bit,
Hey, this is Carlos from Mascaras, and my favorite Habesha memory was from the last snowstorm we had last year. I trudged a bunch of gear in the snow to play the show with Mascaras, and I was kind of probably wondering if no one's going to show up. Not only is the place packed, Brandon joins us on stage to do a cover of Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come. With it being like 20 degrees outside, it was a wonderful night. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, it's Jenny here from our home at Open Road Studios down at the IPRC. I have a wonderful update to share with you guys. We have launched our website and our blog and are now on iTunes. You can find us at www.grittybirds.com and on iTunes at the Gritty Birds podcast. If you've liked the podcast, please give us a boost by reviewing us on iTunes, and keep checking us out every Tuesday at Vortex Music Magazine. When did you first get involved with music?
I was conceived on the road. My parents were musicians, and they had met in a band, and I mean, literally, I spent the first couple of months of my life on the road with my parents, going to hotels, and they were in a I guess you'd call it a wedding band. They were a cover band. They did top 40, but they would do, like I said, they were touring the country, like doing convention centers or playing bigger events. They would get flown out to Hawaii every year to play a big convention for Duracell. my father is the greatest musician I've ever seen, and I mean I've seen a lot. I don't just say that because he's my father. I mean he really is truly amazing. He can play the bass and sing like as good or better than anyone I've ever seen. And my mother is the greatest performer I've ever seen. She's like a born performer. She's an amazing singer, but she just has a charisma that is just undeniable. And and having grown up with that, again, like it just kind of became a part of me. It wasn't, she never gave me vocal lessons per se, but it was always just like the talk around the dinner table.
Right.
And, you know, one of my earliest memories with my dad was just playing a game where he would play something on his knees, you know, like, and then I would play it back. You know, we would do that for hours. And I mean, I was maybe, you know, 4 years old at the time, maybe younger, you know. So, yeah, music was always a part of my life from the very beginning.
Did you write and perform a lot when you were younger, or was it just something that you grew up with? And
yeah, I was a little more of a jock, honestly.
Really?
In school. Oh yeah. Again, you know,
what did you play?
Baseball, basketball, football. Played a little bit of soccer. I didn't really like soccer too much, but basketball I'd say basketball was my favorite and what I excelled most at. My father was, you know, he was usually the coach of the rec teams, or he would be taking me to the games. You know, I played on a couple of travel teams, and he would always take me, and, you know, we'd stay in the hotels. And he was, you know, one of his proudest achievements as a father, still to this day, he'll tell you, is having me dribble a basketball 100 times when I was 1 year old.
He was really all about that rhythm with you.
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, I mean, he's also a drummer.
Have you ever drummed? I feel like you should be one.
I do. Well, I'm actually in a band currently with James Taylor and Evan from Minden and friend Edgar. And we're called Ice Queens, and we have a 6-song EP that we're working on right now. It should be out hopefully late summer, early fall.
Yeah.
And I'm drumming in that, so.
Oh, that seems natural. When did you start producing shows?
I mean, I sort of had a hand in booking a few shows at a space called Boom Bap. Mm-hmm. That was run by my friends Derek and Kristen Larson. They were running it. It was on Stark. It was on, I believe it was 6th and Stark. It was like right down the street from Slammer. And they were open for about a year. And when they first started, I wouldn't say I booked a show. I just helped them get in contact with a few bands. That was kind of other than the house show situation, that was probably my first time talking to bands and, you know, putting people in contact and making shows happen kind of thing. But I wouldn't say I was booking or producing those shows. It really started when I started working at Abacia.
Yeah, and then I guess some of the house shows before, but you were just doing that like little bits and pieces.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end of it, after Adam had moved out especially, I sort of took the lead in the house and was the one that I was the point man.
Are you still at the house?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's great.
I'm still at the house, and you know, that's another great part about me not working at Abacia anymore, is that I can do house shows again, hopefully,
hey.
and you know,
go back to where it started.
Exactly, go back to where it started, and I feel like there's definitely a huge void there right now in the scene. I feel like not a lot of people are doing, you know, you had Deacon Manor closing down, obviously, which was right down the street from the house, and you know, there are still some really cool houses that have started to pop up. But again, I just feel like there's a huge calling for that now. So I feel like maybe it's good timing,
right? In
a way.
Are you from the Northwest?
No. I'm from upstate New York. I moved here in 2008.
What brought you here?
Music, sort of, and change of scenery. I was in a band with my friend Sam Farrell, who now is playing bass in Wooden Indian, Burial Ground, who played the first show at Abacia also.
Oh, okay.
But I digress. But we were in a band, and his sister was living out here at the time, and we said, wouldn't this band, or he had suggested that the band that we were doing in New York would go over well in Portland. Maybe we should check it out. We didn't really end up doing it.
Oh, you moved here and then...
It was weird. I remember, I remember driving down 84 in Mount Hood, coming into view for the first time, and like, okay, like this is where I had never been here. When I told everyone that I was moving to Portland, they say, what are you moving to Maine for?
Of course, because you're East Coast.
Yeah, so, and I had no preconceived notions about what Portland was, or I knew nothing about it. And I think that was part of the allure, was that, Seattle had its identity, San Francisco had its identity, LA, like all.
But Portland was like malleable.
Still at the time in my mind, yeah, it didn't really, I had never been there, and it did not have any kind of national identity if you weren't from this area. And I was obviously not, I was, about as far away as you could get, so.
You're a New Yorker.
Well, New York is a big state, and yeah, when you say New York, people automatically think of the city, but which I definitely did. My mother was born and raised in Brooklyn, so she definitely was important to her that I experienced the city, and the small town that I grew up in had a train that went to the city, so I could essentially walk to New York City. I'm on a train, and 2 hours later I'm in the city,
right?
Which I did frequently, and I was in bands that played. I had DJ'd, I did jobs here and there, and had friends that lived down there. So I definitely spent a good amount of time in the city. Saw a lot of music and partied and blah blah blah. But I'm definitely not a city kid. Do you ever
think about going back to the East Coast?
Yeah. I definitely have gained an appreciation for the town that I grew up in. It's a nice town. You grow up in a small town, and then you start to experience the world, and you think, oh, I'm such a sheltered person, and oh, this small town, mentality, blah, blah, blah. But really, it's a really nice place to raise a family. It's a nice, I think there's definitely good things about it.
Yeah.
That I do miss. But I'm just really happy here right now.
Right.
And I could see myself going anywhere.
But right now you're here.
Right now I'm here, yeah. But it's great,
What are 3 words you'd use to describe Portland?
I'm trying not to be facetious. I'm trying to answer seriously.
Theo answered facetiously, and then he had a second one.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say music. Politics. And community.
How about 3 words to describe the Portland music scene?
Saturated, thriving, and community.
Yeah. Okay, so the Thursday before the venue was supposed to close, there was an incident with the owners during the karaoke party where the owners came upstairs and shut down the bar, and the cops came. I'm curious, go back just a little bit. We're not going to ask too many questions about this, but I know that there's a lot of questions. I was at the bar that instant when it happened, but I want to hear it from your words versus, anyone else's. How did you find out that the venue was closing?
I had heard about it for the first time about 2.5 weeks prior to that. It was on a Sunday, and it was right before a show that I had that unfortunately I ended up having to cancel. Sorry, Matt. My friend Matt Stengel had put that on, and it was unfortunate I had to cancel that night. But anyways, they told me, and it was the people downstairs. It was Webb and Anish. They were the married couple that ran the restaurant. Anish, did all the cooking, and Webb, he also had other jobs that he was doing, but he just kept it all kind of, under control in general. And sometimes we butted heads. I had a good relationship with him, but as anyone will when you're sort of partners in a business. I mean, he was my boss for sure, but he also saw me as an equal in a lot of ways, and more so when it came to what was going on at the bar. I mean, he definitely would defer to me on a lot of things, but some things not, and we would butt heads. And, we were both stressed out, and we both knew that and respected that. So sometimes he would have Anish come and talk to me because he knew that she would keep it at a, she would keep it level. She would keep at an emotional balance. So anyways, she told me, and I think I definitely had a moment. I had about an hour or two of pure just hatred and anger and frustration. But it was about 2.5 weeks prior to the last night.
What did they say was the reason for closing?
Basically that they just didn't want to renew the lease, that they were tired. This was something that I had known. Yeah. That had been alluded to many times. They are very family oriented people. Their children would be there a good portion of the time. I picked up their children from school for about a month when Webb went back to Ethiopia to see his mother, I believe it was. And family was always a part of that situation for them. And I think that it just they weren't getting enough out of it to make what they were putting into it worth it.
Right.
And, they couldn't see their kids as much, and it just wasn't worth it to them after a certain point, and they were tired. They were doing it for 3 years. I had been there for 2.5 years. And at that point to them, we gave it an honest shot.
Yeah.
It's just.
But it wasn't enough for the people who were paying the main bills to make it keep going.
It just, again, I don't know whether, I don't think we were losing money.
Yeah.
But we definitely weren't making a ton either. You weren't getting rich.
You were probably breaking even plus a little bit, but not much.
I mean, me personally being the bartender, the only bartender.
Right.
Yeah, I did all right. I definitely, that is also the first time in my life where I've been financially secure enough to really not have to think about every dollar that I spend.
Right.
So, but again, a lot of money went back. I mean, I can't even count how much money went into that place. It's just, paper towels, limes. I stopped making flyers after a while because it was just so much money, $20, $30 a week sometimes, but, flyers and cables and adapters and this and that, and then just the actual expense of all the music equipment. I mean, I probably spent at least $10,000 on just music equipment. Just
in just 2.5 years.
Even less than that, because I really didn't start making purchases till at least 6 months into it.
Right.
So you're talking about 2, maybe a year and a half.
Right.
But even still, I really wasn't too concerned about money. It was always okay, I'm good. I maybe have a day here and there where it was I get paid tomorrow, right. But it was never that bad. But for them, they're not making all those tips.
Right.
So.
What happened that night then? Do you have any idea?
Well.
I mean, there's the specific events about what happened,
I have an idea. But again,
is it something you're even comfortable saying?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't
absolutely.
know.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm comfortable talking about it. I mean, there was a blog the next day in the Willamette. I spoke to Matthew, and because he actually he showed up that night.
Oh, Matthew was there too.
He showed up after it all went down, and pretty much the last couple of people were filing out, and he was like, "What the hell's going on?" Yeah.
I left because they were asking for my press pass. I was asking a couple questions, and I was just my what? No, I was like, hey, I'm actually here. You should have asked
for their OLCC service permit.
I didn't know what to say.
Behind the bar.
No, I was like, oh, I'm here. I'm covering this because I'm interviewing Brandon the day after, and I just what's going on? And they're like, can we see your press pass? And I'm like, what? I don't understand. They're like, and they were very frustrated. They were very, very frustrated.
Wow.
And I was like, I think I need to go. So after you close out, I'm like, we need to leave because I don't know what's going on. The cops are coming in. I mean, that was the experience that I had. And I can say from what I saw that I was really impressed with how you kept your cool. I could tell you were really holding your own. and it looked like you were really, really frustrated, but you still maintained your composure with a packed bar. I've never seen it so busy, you know?
It was. But, well, okay, so you got to understand something. There was, well, you know, actually it was interesting because it's really kind of funny, really. When I came in that day,
right,
Belai, the landlord who shut it down, he took me aside right as the band was starting. You know, Mild High Club had played a short set before karaoke started, and maybe about 10 minutes before they were going to go on, Belai pulls me aside and says, he pulls up the article that had just come out in the Mercury the day before.
Right.
And he says, "What's this?" And basically, he took issue with something that was said about what was going on, you know, or the reasons that the bar was closing, and he thought it was painting him in a bad light. And I explained to him, I'm like, actually, no. For one, I personally don't think that.
Right. And
two, I don't think that that's really what the article is saying, and I don't think it's giving that impression or anything. In fact, some of the things that I've read were saying that it was nice to see that it wasn't for some kind of weird reason, or that it wasn't some kind of sellout reason.
Yeah,
it was
one
like
of the first times I haven't seen that.
Right, exactly, and not to mention that no one mentioned his name.
Oh yeah, I didn't know it until the Willamette Week article.
Yeah, and that was the thing. He was concerned over bad publicity, and then he goes and does something like that, and gives himself all of the bad publicity. I mean, he couldn't have gotten any worse. Yeah, I mean, like, not only people didn't know who he was, but now people know who he is, and some people hate his guts.
I feel kind of bad for him.
I know. I mean, I don't know how I feel. I mean, up until that point, we had a good relationship. You know, I can't say I got to know the man very well, but anytime I saw him, it was cool. I mean, I on Facebook, you know, but like I posted something just trying to clarify the situation, and you know, there were some people who were like, "Oh, we need to, you know, mail this guy a box of poop," or you know, blah blah, you know, and stuff. And I know that it's coming from a place of concern for me and support for me, and I appreciate that. But at the same time,
and also I think we're just all a little bit frustrated with venues being closed at this point.
Right.
Yeah, there's a certain level of frustration.
Absolutely.
That's pretty ripe at the moment.
Absolutely. But I mean, prior to that, I had a good relationship with him. I mean, we actually had a joke. Whenever I would see him, he would whisper, he'd go, "ISIS," because they always joke that I look like a terrorist with my beard, you know. And so then I would sneak up behind him and like, you know, run my thumb across his neck like I was slitting his throat and say Al Qaeda, you know. And like we had and everyone laughed. It was just, you know, whatever. It was like this weird, sick, twisted joke, but
it was a pretty messed up joke,
sick and twisted. But again, it was a very endearing little thing that we had, you know. Like, I mean, we had like an actual relationship. It wasn't just like, oh, shake hands, yes. It was like we were friendly, and I liked all of his friends. They were very nice, you know. And it wasn't that way from the beginning, you know. I definitely developed a relationship with those guys after a while, so it was very shocking and disheartening, you know. It made me a little sad, you know. It kind of hurt my feelings a little bit because I felt like I hadn't done anything to give him the impression that I would ever want to make him look bad, even though, I mean, if you talk to Tony about his experience with him, which I believe, you know, they wrote about fairly extensively after Tony left in an interview, he did not have that. He did not share that good relationship with him. So it was unfortunate.
My name is James Danoon, host of Sessions from the Box. I remember back in, I think it was like February of 2015,
Jeremiah's birthday sex that I've ever heard. So make sure that if we're talking about Brandon from Abisha, we should mention his beautiful pipes, because he can sing like a demon, a beautiful demon. So sorry to see Abisha go. Thanks for all the good memories.
We're about halfway through the episode, and I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor at Montucky Cold Snacks. As my friends down at Double Dragon, located only a couple blocks from the studio at the IPRC on 12th and Division know, I do love me a cold snack. I love their message. A portion of all Montucky sales goes back to supporting local communities. the last chapter wasn't a pretty one, and it was a short chapter. It was like one night. It was a bad one, but Habesha had 2.5 years of great stories. What was the wildest night that you worked?
Man, well, other than that last night.
Yeah, other than the last night. I think like I realized I said that, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Other than the last night, I would say it probably had to be okay. There were 2 nights that stand out. The first one being the first night, which was Old Light, Wooden Indian Burial Ground, and O'Dunes. And I had my friend Sarah Moon helping me out bartending. Thank God. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was in for. Like I said, this was my first real night of bartending.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
I had just gotten my my server's
You're like,
permit.
this
was
seems like something I can do.
Hot off the press, baby. And like, so I stepped my naive ass behind the bar, and it was one of the busiest nights. Maybe I just remember it that way, but like I said, I had Sarah helping me, and then at the end of the night, we just got slaughtered all night, and she was doing a majority of the work. I'm cracking beer cans and doing whatever I can, and just trying to like watch what she's doing. And I asked her at the end of the night, I said, "Is that normal?" And she goes, "Dude, I've been bartending for like 10 years. That was one of the craziest nights I've ever had to work. Like, good luck." And I was like, "Oh, well, okay,"
Right.
But it was kind of good, because after that, it was like not every night was that busy for a while, and any night wasn't that busy for a while. So it was kind of like, I feel like it was like a good way to start, But you couldn't fit another person in there, and it was just all out chaos. The other night that definitely stands out, there were so many great shows and just magical nights.
Yeah.
But the craziest was definitely the Cower reunion show.
Who's Cower?
Cower is a band, I'm sure you probably know, Jake in Moon Bayou.
Of course.
And Nick Vicario and Wild Ones. They had a hardcore band when they were all in high school called Cower.
Oh, and they reunited at
and they had
Habesha.
And they had played at the house. I knew that's kind of how I had gotten to meet those guys, is through house shows. And they played, and I'm just laughing just thinking about it. It was just utter insanity. People were like jumping off tables, crowd surfing, stage diving. Like, 2 or 3 of my friends had to run out at various points to go on beer runs, because we just kept running out of everything. All night was just like, I need this, I need that, I need limes, I need cups, and that. But again, that community of people, and that was almost on a nightly basis, where if it was really busy, always friends were offering to like work the soundboard, or do you need this, do you need that? So it was never crazy, even though like it sounds crazy being the only one. I was never alone, really.
Yeah.
But the Cower show was without a doubt the craziest. I'm pretty sure people were just like smoking joints all over the place. That's what it smelled like. It was, thank God the fire marshal didn't show up on that night, because I
would have been over for a while.
He would have either taken me away in handcuffs, or he would have just died of a heart attack on the spot.
That's really funny. To put it in your own words, what was a show that was especially magical, that touched your heart?
Oh man. Well, there was actually the last show that we had was really special. It was Havana Wall played. They did they recently came out with an album, 13 AD, and it's a concept album. And what they did was they performed the album from beginning to end, accompanied by a live performance, it was like an allegorical play based on The Wizard of Oz. And that was,
wow.
Yes. And they had actors come in. They came, they had like a person who was stage managing and doing prop. They had like costume changes,
wow.
and all these props that they brought in, and silly string and glitter, and it was just, and so many friends. They were dear friends of that place, almost from the beginning, for me. And they were, they introduced me to Tony, them and Elena and Carl from Needles and Pizza. They're now Gentle Bender. They all introduced me to Tony because I had heard of Mudai, but I was really unaware of Tony. I had never met him. So
you didn't know Tony before you started Habesha?
No.
And just to give context to anyone who's listening, Tony Prado, who is now the at Bunk.
Yeah, who ran Mudai. Into the ground. No, Tony's great. He's always been very supportive.
Tony's the one I texted when I couldn't find your phone number. He didn't text back yet, but
yeah,
I'll probably get in an hour and a half.
Yeah, totally. It was great meeting him. He actually ended up moving into the house
that I'm at.
I
assumed you guys knew each other.
Within a month of meeting, really. It was just kind of, he had just gotten through this really weird situation where he was living / trying to create a venue thing. I won't go into detail about that. Whatever.
That's Tony's story.
Exactly.
I look forward to asking it next time I interview. The time I finally interview him, I'll have to ask him about that.
There you go. I'm sure I would love to tell you. But it was nice getting to have him around when I came home, for one, because it's nice having a roommate on the same schedule as you when you live such a weird schedule. Mm-hmm. 2, I could relate to him in ways that I really cannot relate. We shared an experience that is so unique that really no one on this earth can I relate to in the way that I can relate to Tony in that way. You know, I would come home and tell him stories and be like, oh, you think that's something? Well, blah, blah, blah. And then, and he totally understood if I said, oh my God, there's whatever. And he's like, oh yeah, the taps aren't working again. Oh my God. I remember I used to have to go buy ice just to keep the beer cold, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
And there's no one else that shared that experience.
Yeah.
That specific experience. So it was really like therapeutic getting to meet him and share that. But yeah, anyways, again, I digress. The Havana Wall show was magical in that it was such a big production that I was so nervous about and stressed out about, especially it being like my last week of work. And, it's kind of like you get in that mode of like, all right, I'm sort of done, and it was like. You were
like your senior year, senioritis?
Yeah, I was short timer, like big time. But I love them, and it was like, yeah, I love you guys. Sounds like it's gonna be a lot of fun, but it went off without a hitch. It was like on time, and the performance was great. There were a lot of people there. Everyone was cool. They helped clean up afterwards, and there was a mess.
There's
glitter everywhere. There was still glitter when I left Thursday, but yeah, that was a really magical night. The other, actually, I got the Grammys show that Like a Villain and W played
that night.
That was probably
the one for me.
Right?
That was amazing.
It was just a beautiful night and just amazing music, and that was one that just made me feel good all night. No matter how busy it got, it was like, this is a really cool thing, and it was like an honor to feel like I had any kind of part in making something that magical happen. It was like the kind of it's the kind of night where I stood behind the bar and said, like, I am proud to be doing what I'm doing right now. One
of my first shows that I produced was it was Like a Villain, Grammys, and 1939 ensemble.
Mm. At Doug Fur.
Yeah,
I was at that show. That was a magical show. That was I had a moment there.
But I feel like there are a couple of the artists. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with Noah and Dan and
sweethearts,
and they're such sweethearts, and they're so consummately wonderful professionals. But also, I just feel like, especially you mentioned the experimental community, and there's something about them as particular artists. Just all those bands are artists. I think first there's this sense of like they don't go into it at all for just like messing around. It's like it's almost, actually, that's not true. Grammys is sometimes they mention it's a joke, but but I feel like there's this sense of like you go into it and you put your whole spirit into it, and it's not just, there's something a little different, and I can't quite pinpoint the right words for it. And that was felt that night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's They would play for free, and they have.
They have many times at
And they're happy
many
to.
of those shows.
It's really not about any kind of like feeling like they are owed anything.
No.
It's something that's important to them,
Yeah.
regardless of compensation, which is why they are probably so well compensated, I feel like, at times, maybe compared to other bands, because you want to give people,
Yeah.
you want to give to people who are like that.
Yeah.
I feel like. I hope they are.
I hope they are, yeah. What's a show that took you by surprise?
Show that took me by surprise. Trying to remember who else played. I mean, some of the experimental shows that we had. My friend and also my roommate Nick Swartz. He does SDM PDX.
Mm-hmm.
He did a monthly there for a while, and also Rob Ham used to do experimental Portland shows there when I first started. He was actually, I gotta say, as the experimental community was embracing Habesha in the beginning, he played I think a pretty large role. He's always been very nice about giving experimental shows at Habesha write-ups, or just little mentions in the Mercury and this and that. But we did it's called Fringe Nights, and that was pretty. Or no, excuse me. That Fringe Nights was one thing. The International Noise Conference. That's what it was. I think it was in June of it had to be June of 2013. Yeah, it was. I think it was something like 22 acts
In
one night in Habesha.
Seriously?
No, yeah,
How?
yeah, right.
Did they just like come in out the back? Like, I mean, how'd you even deal with that? The gear.
When I tell you that show ran on time.
It ran on time?
On time.
That seems impossible.
They had the schedule written out. And Fringe Nights. That is one thing I got to say. Like, the experimental community,
They got it together.
They got it together, man. They are like,
I feel like they're
especially
always
Nick.
Fighting up a wall, so they're like, we're going to do everything.
Well, Nick,
sure.
well, again, they're like, it's not just about music to them. There's a whole aesthetic. And, a lot of those guys, they're like gearheads, so it's like they have the kind of like this mind to like compartmentalize things, I guess, and be organized about things. And Nick is insanely organized. So, when he did the Fringe Nights, it was the same deal. We had like 20 something artists, and 2 stages going. We had in the little side room.
Oh, okay. I was like, where?
There used to be a little like riser that we used for the Fringe Nights and for the International Noise Conference. So we had 2 stages going, and I mean those nights ran right on time. I've had shows with 3 bands that went till 2:00 for no good reason, just because.
But not this one.
These ones, I mean, when the schedule said it ends at 2:20. The last band ended at like 2:22. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It was just like, I can't even believe that just happened.
Way to go.
And it was and again, those were some magical nights too, it was really great. We had some really it was good vibe,
That's so funny. Are there any artists that you wish you'd gotten a chance to work with that it just didn't work out before your time was over?
Yeah, I would have loved to have had and there, just because they're
They
homies.
never played there?
They never actually played there. I mean, I feel like
I went to an N show there, but mostly just because
I think Surf Drugs.
Oh yeah,
played.
Yep.
But I mean, again, like they were there so often, I feel like they might as well have, like in my mind, they pretty much did, Bim and Ryan were there a lot. Bim especially. I mean, Bim was like a permanent fixture, for a minute. And thank God, because I love that man. But
I need to edit that out of the article because I think I actually put them in because I was like, oh, Ann played. I saw them.
I mean, it was
so
part of my time there was kind of a blur. So I suppose anything's possible. But no, it just would have been nice just because they're homies and
Yeah.
But Blood Beach was, I wanted to have them play when I first started. And then they broke up, and then I almost had them play there. They ended up playing at Beacon Sound, but Robert Comets had hit me up about doing that show. Comets, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He hit me up about doing that, and I was so stoked for a minute, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
That was another great show. I gotta say, he booked an amazing show on St. Patrick's Day. It was Car Sick Cars. I think somebody mentioned it recently, in I think I can't remember which article it was, but they said that was their most memorable night. It was Car Sick Cars from Beijing, Flavor Crystals from Minneapolis, Hornet Leg, and Woolen Men.
That's cool.
And it was St. Patrick's Day.
That must have been really fun.
Oh, it was insane. It was great, though.
Yeah,
it was great.
Like the good insane.
The good insane. The great insane.
How it should be.
Hi, this is Didi. Just a little sweet love message for Habesha and Brandon Nikola. And just remember that time when my dad came all the way from Mexico City. And we went straight to karaoke and we were all having drinks with him. And how about the time when your mom came to visit? And then we all got to hear why you have such an awesome voice. This is sang for us too. Well, this is for Habesha Karaoke family forever. Woo, miss you. Bye.
Hey, it's time for our ticket giveaway. Do you want to win tickets to Balto's 7-inch release with Roselit Bone and Old Wave at Secret Society on July 11th? Share this podcast on your social networks and tag the Gritty Birds podcast. The first person to do so will win. Anthony Luss came on about a year and a half ago, and earlier when I was just sending you an email, you mentioned that he was your sound guy, door guy, and savior.
Yeah.
How did he come about to join the team with you?
He has a party. He has a warehouse space that he throws parties in. He has like DJs from all over the country. Yeah, no,
Where?
It's southeast. Oh God, I can't remember. And honestly, I don't know if I should really be saying, because he kind of has like a
so there's
private,
a space that's a
It's
little...
not really. It's something that he likes to publicize because it's a very kind of a cult thing that he's developed, and you know, if he wanted to, he could, but I think he does it on purpose to not blow it out of proportion. But he was looking for a space to maybe do some of his parties, you know, in a more like legit space. And I guess he had just looked on the map. He literally just looked on a map and said, that is the most central. It's like dead center. Habesha is
dead central.
Pretty much dead center of the city.
That was one of the great things about it, is that you didn't matter where you lived in the city, Habesha was right there. Right.
It was never too far. So he had looked at that and said, okay, well, that seems like it seems like the best location. And when he came there and we had a talk, you know, I think we just both kind of, you know, we're vibing on each other, and we realized, okay, like this is a guy who is on the level. You know, I mean, you know, sometimes people would come in and maybe they're a little pretentious, maybe they're a little naive, maybe they're just not easy to work with for whatever reason. But like, I felt like meeting up with him, he seemed motivated enough and cool enough at the same time, you know, which is not always an easy combination in people to find.
What was able to happen when he came on? Like, what was the difference that you found?
Well, just having somebody there, period, was nice. Especially, you know, closing up at night. I mean, you know, there's being on Broadway, there's always that, you know, we had gotten broken into, and we had, you know, it's not the nicest neighborhood in town necessarily. I mean, I never felt in danger, but there was always a possibility that some weirdo could come knocking on the door, and, you know, it's nice to at least have somebody else there. Not to mention, you know, when the show is going on, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'd like to go to the bathroom and not have to, like, you know, be thinking every second, like, God, I hope someone's not behind the bar right now. God, I hope someone's not stealing the money. I hope, you know, like all these things are running through my head where I'm just trying to like take a whiz, you know?
Yeah.
So it was nice to have somebody there for that. And it made it a lot easier to get money for bands because he was working the door, and he not only is experienced in that, but he's passionate. He cares about touring bands. That was always very important to him, to make sure that touring bands, and it's important to me too. It's another thing we shared, you know, like take care of the touring band. And so
like
it was
they are on the road, they're paying gas, they're staying on people's floors. Yeah.
I mean, we get it. He's been booking for years. I mean, he used to do stuff over at Ground Control for a while, and he's done, I mean, you know, I mean, he's like he's booked some really big band. I mean, he booked Fugazi one time, you know, like,
wow.
I mean, like he's been doing it a while, you know, and like, he definitely knows what he's talking about, and he loves music, and, he's just a nice guy, you know, and
Right.
he's definitely become one of my best friends, you know, like
Yeah.
we've shared, again, like I feel like we're kind of war buddies in a way, you know, like we've had some wild nights together, and we've had some wild experiences dealing with things that happened at the bar, and yeah, you know, we've shared in success, and we've shared in, you know, like pain, you know, so he's been very important to me. I really don't know how I ever did that job, but without him. It scares me to think what I was going through in my brain without him, you know, because I mean, working the sound and dealing with all the customers, it would just like to be doing that alone. I mean, there were still nights when I would have to do that, but having him there was always just like, okay, like,
Yeah.
Anthony's there.
Do you think there was anything that could have been done to keep the venue open?
People could have stopped getting only $2 PBRs now.
I know, seriously.
I mean, more money.
Yeah.
I mean, money talks, you know, I mean, honestly, it's, people would always say like, man, you're killing it there. And I'd be like, yeah, there's people, and people appreciate it, and that's great, and I love it. And I'm certainly, I try not to be a capitalist, but at the same time, when you're running a business, that's kind of an unfortunate reality of the situation, is that you gotta make money.
Yeah.
And if we were making a lot more money, I think they would have thought twice about renewing the lease.
Yeah.
Because, okay, like, we're making money. This is worth it.
Do you think the small venues are still sustainable in Portland?
Yeah, I think they can be. I think anything can be. I mean, I think that it has to be a labor of love. It can't be something that you go into thinking you're going to make a lot of money, because there's a really good chance that you're not, maybe.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, a lot of places, even the successful ones, are still not necessarily making a profit yet. You know, or if they are, it's not because of the shows. You know, sometimes shows actually, you're operating at a loss because of all the overhead and the fact that, yeah, like, you know, people come to a show sometimes and they'll buy a beer and then they'll stand and watch the band for 40 minutes. And then, you know, maybe they'll get another beer after that. They'll get, you know, and it's like they're paying money at the door, but door money doesn't always go to the venue. A lot of times, especially when you're dealing with smaller venues, it's going all to the bands. Very rarely, on rare occasions, would I actually take money from the door, and it was a small portion just for like upkeep with equipment and stuff. But I mean, if there was a touring band, it always went to the touring band, unless they made tons of money and I know that they sold a lot of merch and they were very happy and it was really busy. Then maybe I would take but like 95% of the time it went. 98% of the time.
What was your general door deal at Habesha?
It was $5. We pretty much every show was like $5.
No, I mean like for the artists.
Oh,
like how did you guys operate?
Touring bands would get like, you know, 50% of the door, at least.
Yeah.
Usually the locals would donate to, almost always.
Yeah.
Again, it depended on the situation. You know,
Right.
if there was enough to go around and everyone was taken care of, then we would, of course, we always want to pay everyone. But if it wasn't that great, usually the locals were very understanding, and they wanted, again, everyone wants to make sure that the touring band is taken care of because they might be the touring band. You know, it's karma.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a black and white thing. I mean, we had general outlines. Essentially, it was like, you know, it would just split evenly if it was all locals, and if it was a touring band, they would get at least 50%, if not more.
Right. In what ways do you think Habesha was quote unquote successful?
I think it was successful in that it was a venue that was doing music every night, whether it was karaoke or whether it was open mic or whether it was just having a DJ. I can't think of many places in town that do it every single night.
You were 7 days a week?
Sometimes during the summer. I mean, Mondays were kind of a day that I would usually take to have off.
I'd actually see you on Mondays.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean to say that every day that they were open.
Right, right.
You know, and last summer, I think I mean, I think I had about, something like 6 or 7 days off for the, June to August, the end of August. And I was working plenty Monday. I was working 21 days in a row sometimes, you know. So, and every night there was an event, it was an event space. So I think it was successful in that it gave a lot of bands that were coming up a chance to have a venue where they knew they could always go if they had a friend's touring band coming through town. Who was it? My friend Eddie Charlton, who's in Lubeck. He was another one of, very constant fixture in that place, always coming in. I love that dude, total sweetheart, very supportive of what I was doing there. And he made some kind of a comment, it might have been a tweet or something about Habesha wave bands or something.
Oh.
And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I just feel like there's a lot of bands, like Consumer.
Oh.
He played his first show ever there.
I didn't know Consumer started there.
That was his first show ever, and every year he did an anniversary show, and this year he played his second anniversary show. So yeah, that was one very specific, and I would say one of the more successful stories, as far as he's played some pretty big shows in the 2 years that he's been going. He's definitely started to do something and just be a busy boy in the music community, and again, a total sweetheart and supporter of Habesha and what I was doing there, and friend, Yeah. So I think it was just good in that, it gave a lot of bands a place to start and a place to thrive.
Yeah.
Where they couldn't elsewhere. If
Habesha had not closed, where did you see that it had room to grow, and where did you kind of see it going in the next year?
It got to a point when I started, I said if I can make it 2 years, that's a personal victory for me. And then after it got past that point, I was not surprised, but I took it day by day. I said, well, okay, we made it through another one. Whether it was the fire marshal gonna shut us down, or whether it was the OLCC, or whether it was this or that or the other thing. Business, money, financial reasons.
But there was always a big bad there.
There was always I didn't take it for granted after a certain point. There was a point maybe where I started to, and then I realized, okay, I feel like financially we had started to plateau, I definitely saw a period of growth for a minute, and then I saw it plateau a little bit, and I said, okay, well, unless some big changes are made, unless someone other than myself is willing to spend a little money to invest and to provide, beer on tap per se, or, maybe, a number of things that we could have done that we didn't do. Unless we start to do those things, it's just there's no way it can ever grow, and it can't go on forever this way.
Yeah. And it didn't.
It didn't. And it didn't. And thank God. I could have, as much as I loved it, it was killing me in a lot of ways, just the stress and the constant pressure. It definitely started to take a toll in a number of ways. But I think most was just psychological burnout, like I was talking about before, with just being constantly consumed by it.
Yeah.
I knew I was burning it at both ends, but I also kind of like that. It's just kind of how I live in general, a lot of times. I've worked other jobs where I've worked just as hard, but it was always I never got the appreciation that I got at Habesha. It's like, a lot of people say, like, it'd be nice if my boss would just say thank you once in a while or something like that. But like every single night, people were coming up to me and telling me how great a job I was doing and how thankful and appreciative they were, and that there was a place. And, so it was this weird emotional, psychological roller coaster I would go through every day. I would come in and be like, oh my God, I got to work again. But then work was always amazing, and I would leave floating on air and then go through it all over again, just the constant, gotta email this, gotta do this, gotta be happy, gotta, be the party guy. Hey, I'm having fun, I swear.
Going a little crazy up here, yeah.
Right, and I was, 95% of that was genuine, but there was always that little 5% where it was like, oh God, I just need to get through this night.
Yeah.
Something, you know.
Hi, this is Jessica Sylvia. I ran the karaoke at Habisha. I would have to say my favorite memory is when somebody sang Harry Belafonte, Jump in the Line, and we created a 20-person conga line, and it was totally radical, and I'll never forget it. And I'm going to miss Habisha so much, and I just wanted to tell Brandon that I love him, and hopefully we can find a new spot to do karaoke at and get the whole crew back together again to recreate the Jump in the Line conga. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, Gritty Birds podcast. My name is Leroy Jerome, and I just wanted to leave a quick voicemail about Habisha. My favorite show wasn't actually a show. It was one of the Thursday night karaoke nights, one of the first time I had been there. And, there was this crazy-looking guy behind the bar with this lush, beautiful beard, and people were singing karaoke, and he got up and performed the most pitch-perfect rendition of Jeremiah's Birthday Sex that I've ever heard. So make sure that if we're talking about Brandon from Habisha, we should mention his beautiful pipes, because he can sing like a demon, a beautiful demon. So sorry to see Habisha go. Thanks for all the good memories.
I'm introducing something new this week, my music picks for the week in Portland, Oregon. First up, don't forget about our ticket giveaway to see Balto on July 11th at Secret Society from earlier in the episode. July 8th, check out a mega women's lineup for Siren Nation, including Moniker, Joanna Warren, Luz Elena Mendoza, and Coco Columbia at Holocene. That same night, Grandparents and Psycho Magic are having a special show at Foster Powell Strip Club Doubles Point. For weekend, keep your eyes open for launch parties for LGBT radio station Wild Planet, as well as new studio Hollowed Halls. Check out my blog at www.grittybirds.com for more of my week picks. Are there plans for you, or in your head, do you imagine yourself running another venue in the future, or do you think about moving in other directions?
As far as opening up my own venue,
or even just running one, like if there was something that not that there's like, sorry, that almost seems silly that I said that out loud.
No.
Are there? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if
the opportunity came up,
I've spoken to people. I feel like people get really excited initially, but then it was like me starting there. I had all these great ideas for things I thought I was going to do, and then slowly the reality of the situation set in, and it was like, okay, like first I got to make sure before I start making a cocktail list, maybe I should start learning how to use the dishwasher,
right?
Or making sure that the ice machine works, and who do I call when it stops working,
right?
It's like you got to look at it realistically. And I've had a lot of friends who are very excited and want to like keep up the momentum of what I had going at Habisha, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that need to happen if you're talking about opening up a venue. See, and that's the thing is that, I feel like people in this town, as far as the music community is concerned, there's a lot of people who are very motivated but not very realistic, and are a little naive when it comes to the business side of it.
I agree. And
what it takes to actually make it happen. It's not, it's not just like, oh, well, we'll have these certain kinds of beers and rock and roll, I know what kind of speakers to get and this blah, blah, blah. Like, no. Like, you got to think infrastructure. You got to think, how much is the rent? What neighborhood are you in? Is it a residential neighborhood? Is it commercial? Is it this? Is it that? I mean, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface.
Were these things you ever even thought of before you were at Habisha?
No.
But now you're like, oh, these are things.
Exactly. And this is what I'm saying, and I feel like people, when they're like, oh, well, I can get some money together, it's like, do you even have any idea the bureaucratic nightmare that we're about to involve ourselves in if you really want to do this? This isn't like, oh, happy fun time, let's just, ride that crest of that wave. Like, no. That's, it's just not going to be that way. And the people who are the most excited, I've come to realize, unfortunately, that they're kind of the most naive. It's
interesting because there's this blood concept. The new blood comes in and they're so excited, and then they then it calms down, but they finally start listening, and it's not bad. I mean, I was that person too, you know.
Oh, everyone is.
Yeah,
at
but
some
it's
point.
really
You have to
it's
be.
important because I do think that there's like an important part too of those people who are like, we got this, and you're like, we're so glad you're here.
Absolutely.
Because we need you to come in and remind us why we need to stay excited, and then you'll become us too. And then there's gonna be someone else who pops in, and then it's all like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't mean to sound like I'm jaded or anything like that.
I think that you have
It's
to be
just-
at a certain point. You can be the naivete. You can't live the rest of your life that way, and that's not a negative thing either.
No.
I don't know. That's just my experience. I mean, where do you see the Portland music scene in 10 years?
Man. There's always going to be. I feel like the thing about Portland music is that it's heavily driven by indie underground music and a very underground sort of like punk rock work ethic. And I think that you'll always have that in a major metropolitan area, no matter what. I mean, you know, I was just talking to Tony the other day about some stuff that's happening in Austin where, you know, a lot of venues are getting messed with because you're having a lot more condo developments and new people coming into areas that were very musical. You know, they had a lot of outdoor venues that are now being forced to shut down or change up their operation because where you once had bands playing outside, now you have this new condo development right next door and all these people who aren't familiar with the way it works. And I think you have a lot of that happening here.
Yeah.
Same situation, you know, it's like people it's achieved this national identity, I feel like, you know, whether it's Portlandia or just whatever kind of image is being projected nationally now, but people have this idea of what they think it is a little more than they did, at least when I moved here. Mm-hmm. So people, again, it's that being naive about a situation. You go in thinking like, oh, everything's going to be great and I'm going to, you know, pickle everything and and then you realize, oh my God, there's live music and sweaty kids, you know, like pissing in my bushes, you know, like kind of, you know, and it's like, okay, like, yeah, that's not the greatest, but at the same time, it's what made this city what you thought it was. But it's just the reality of the situation that people don't want to accept.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
We'll see. Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see
really
as
curious.
it grows. I mean, I think, again, like, it's always going to be awesome. You're always going to have great people who live here. Hopefully, you know, not everyone moves out.
Will you be here?
Not everyone gets pushed out.
Who knows?
In 10 years, yeah. I mean, who's to say, you know?
Who's to say if any of us are going to be here? Wait, that not in the dark way.
No, yeah. I mean, you know,
really,
move on or, you know, I don't think I'm burning it at both ends that hard. I think maybe, you know, hopefully still be alive in 10 years. But yeah, I think that it's gonna maybe be good for some scenes and bad for others, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
What do you think needs to happen to prevent more closures in the city?
Well, I think that, you know, the city could definitely do things to support live music and to not. I feel like the governmental bodies in the city that are set up to interact with live music venues are generally there to tell them what they can't do or what they have to do to change to, you know, they're not there to support necessarily. Like, I don't know. I don't know of anyone who's going out and saying like, oh, well, let's talk about how you can like, you know, even the noise control officer, like I had a meeting with him and we were talking about ways to soundproof, or like, you know, he came in to assess the building to see where noise was escaping.
But then where's
from.
the money come from?
A, where does the money come from? B, they're not exactly providing you with any kind of information on where to get this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, different to explore any kind of options other than to say, okay, here's what you got to do. Now go make it happen. There's no real support.
Right. It's just like, these are the guidelines.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah. They're like the gatekeepers.
Yeah. There's not like someone you can call who's like, oh, we can. Yeah. That's interesting.
And not only that, but it's really a reflection of, I think, our society as a whole. When you look at the values, the intrinsic values of what's going on, because I live right next to a daycare center. 8 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday, I have like 80 screaming children right 10 feet from my bedroom window. Mm-hmm. Now, can I call and complain about that just because I work a different schedule than most people? You know, I mean, I'm not sleeping with my window closed during this heat because I deal with it.
Yeah.
I understand. I live in a city where there's going to be noise.
We share space.
Yeah, you learn to live with it and you move on. You know, I mean, I could understand if it was a house venue and there were kids underage drinking and, you know, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But when you're talking about businesses, I think that the city needs to maybe do a little more to make, well, okay, you could soundproof these new condos better.
Oh, so then they wouldn't have to worry about it.
You could put it on them. Like, you can't.
They've got more money.
You can't, exactly. They're the ones with all the money. Like, okay, like you're building a new condo, it has to be up to these standards. It has to be soundproof. Not just for the venue's sake, but for the people living there.
Right.
For all kinds of noise, for construction, for this, for that. No one can complain about the garbage truck waking me up at 2:30 in the morning every you know, whatever, Tuesday or whatever it is. It's just we accept it and we move on. You know, all the construction going on the street, we have to accept it and move on.
Starts at 6 a.m., yeah.
But live music, well, you guys have to just stop it because, you know, nobody wants that. Like, well, no, it's actually just maybe like we're catering to, you know, like, especially with Habesha, you had the neighborhood association. What's there, maybe 30 people total? So we're going to cater to like 0.001% of the population because they are a little cranky.
Yeah.
Because they have money. And it's not only is it not fair, it's counterproductive. You're turning this city into something that it's not. You're turning the city into something that is different from what made the city so alluring in the first place.
Right.
And they don't even realize it because they're just worried about making money. Yeah, I think that's something that should be explored. Make it have that become the standard where if you're going to build a condo and you're going to build it in a certain part of town or any part of town for that matter, it should be very well soundproofed. But the venues have to do it. Why shouldn't they have to do it?
Right.
You know, that's
Makes
one
sense.
thing.
Yeah. Kind of winding down. What did Habesha mean for you personally?
Yeah. It meant when I first moved here, I felt like a resident tourist for a while. I wasn't coming here to set any, well, I wasn't setting roots yet. I was experiencing everything that was new. I just wanted to see everything. I wanted to go everywhere. I wanted to eat at every restaurant. I wanted to try everything, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I realized that's selfish way to live because you're not giving anything back to where you live. You don't have to grow up somewhere, be born somewhere for you to make it your home. And I feel like people have this tendency, well, no, I won't say people, I just say that sometimes I felt myself not giving Portland a real chance because I wasn't just doing something that was bigger than me. It was all about like, what can I see? What can I do? What can I taste? What can I touch? You know, like it's all just, so I think Habesha for me really was the confirmation of that. Is if you plant the seed and till the field, like you will reap the harvest. Yeah. And like since my time there, I felt like I'm finally connected to the city, and I finally feel like this really is my home, not just because of the financial aspects, not because of, you know, having friends and, you know, maybe like I'll get a free beer when I walk into a certain bar because this guy's working or something like that. Like, yeah, that's cool, but I feel like I've paid my dues, and I can truly call Portland my home.
Yeah. If you could have a message to all the patrons from Habesha, what would it be?
I love you. Seriously. I mean, I go to other bars. I see how it is. I feel the vibe in the room. And I gotta say that I was the luckiest bartender in town, without a doubt. Not just for how much I would get away with murder on a nightly basis, being out of stuff and this and that, and like no one ever gave me no one ever gave me an attitude about anything. You might see a little bit of frustration on their face, but like no one ever took it out on me.
Yeah.
And very seldom were the times where people would actually do something disrespectful to me and or the venue.
Yeah.
And so many people were just so appreciative and supportive. So, I mean, I felt like every night I was just getting to like serve my friends drinks and watch my friends play music. It wasn't like I was going to work with these, and then like the customers came in. It was like, no, like my friends, even if they weren't necessarily my friends.
Yeah.
They became my friends.
Right.
So, yeah, thanks for making what could have been a much more stressful situation not as stressful. Yeah. And thank you. And yeah, without trying to sound too pretentious, I love all of you.
Thank you, Brandon. Yeah, no, really. Thank you for coming in today, and thanks for, I guess, Habesha personally. It was a very special room to me. And I never even played there. I always wanted to, and it never happened. I talked to you the whole time.
That's true. Maybe that is my biggest regret. You're the artist that
I'm
I
the
never
one.
worked
It was me. That was it.
But I got to see you so often, so it made up for it.
I sang there. I close the podcast every week with the question: the world would be a better place if people could have respect. If people could have the same respect for strangers as they did for the people they loved. Not love them, but to at least respect them and see them as a human being, and to not be consumed by initial judgment or initial impressions of people. The person on the street begging for change, or, the person, not to be too cliche, but seriously, I think it's easy to talk about equal rights, but equal rights don't exist without an equal respect. Yeah.
So just try to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Words to live by.
Hopefully.
Anyway, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing what you're up to coming forward.
Me too.
Thanks again for tuning into this very special double episode of the Gritty Birds podcast. This week, we featured music by Grammys, Old Light, Minden, and Joanna Newsom, and Consumer. Brandon, thank you for everything you brought to us over the last 2.5 years at Habesha, and I can't wait to stay up to date on what you have coming up next. You can find Gritty Birds every Tuesday at Vortex Music Magazine online at vrtxmag.com. Check out the website for great articles, reviews of shows, previews, and ticket giveaways to stay up to date on what's happening in music in Portland and the national scene today. You can follow us online at www.grittybirds.com or at GRITTY Birds, Gritty Birds, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and SoundCloud, and support us directly at patreon.com/grittybirds. Don't forget that we're new on iTunes, and please leave us your reviews. Next week, we have Tender Loving Empire co-founder Jared Mees on deck. Till next time.